request before we get to the Lord in prayer? There's a budget request.
Sister Terry, I'd like the church to pray for, a friend of mine lost his life the other night, from COVID. He was 59 years old. He was in the hospital, I'm not sure exactly how long, but they let him come home, and the next night he died. His name's Billy Morrison. So pray for him and his family.
I know we've got a lot of requests, but I'm gonna give a praise report, because I think when God does something for us, we ought to tell it. I went to one of my granddaughter's birthday parties in Lexington yesterday, and coming back on 85, we were going 75 miles an hour. And a car came over into my lane and knocked me into the other lane.
Oh my.
And my front wheel took most of the hit, but I didn't think that much about it, but it hit me in another lane, and so we had to pull over, and of course, when the policeman came. But after I got done, my oldest daughter was sitting in the front seat with me. She said, "Mom, I thank you for taking control of the car, because as we sit there was like multiple 18-wheelers coming by us constantly." And so the more I sit there, the more I thought, you know what? God protected us. I mean, even though I got hit going 75 miles an hour and knocked in the other lane, God didn't allow one of those 18-wheelers to hit my daughter and my daughter on the other side, because things could be a whole lot different this morning. I thank God for that.
Yeah.
And I looked at her car yesterday and I said, Crystal, only by the grace of God, I mean, there's a couple of scratches and a little dent. Only by the grace of God, they got serious.
Yeah.
75 miles an hour, you don't get little scratches.
I have a very special request that God knows about, and we need him to move on.
I have a friend who, she just got married about 9 months ago. Found out a month ago she's pregnant. And her husband's mother and the family went down to the beach. His mother and his grandfather, his father, got sick. They had to put him in the hospital, and they had COVID. She died Sunday, he died Monday. So they're devastated. They really need our prayers. Lost both of them at the same time.
Our aunt just died, Martha and I went to the funeral yesterday, but she was a Christian, 91 years old, longing to go home. But just pray for her family.
Remember our mechanic too, Doug Burns, out there on 29? He's been in the hospital for a month now, dealing with COVID and pneumonia. His wife said he is getting better, but he had like a roller coaster ride. So if you know what, please call his name out and remember him and his family.
Yes.
My refrigerator died this week, and God opened the door for me to give me a new one. And I just praised him for it, because there was no way I could have done it without him.
Thank you. Praise the Lord.
Okay, let's all go to.
Remember Sister Tony and her family too.
Crystal has a request. Oh, I was just gonna pray for our healthcare workers. I talked to my middle daughter yesterday, and the people who, the healthcare workers that's working with the people in the hospital, they're having to make some really bad, just decisions, and just help them to make the right decisions, because they don't have enough help there.
So this is Rowan. All right, let's all go to the Lord in prayer.
Father, we come to you, Lord. Thank you for the love and mercy and grace and your forgiveness, Lord. We're so thankful, Lord, all of our forgiveness. So many, Lord, that are grieving, passing their loved ones, Lord, and we pray, love this man, bless them,
lesson today is God cares for creation. And the text is taken from 38:1 and a bunch of other scriptures. But it says, "Then the Lord answered Job out of the storm. He said, who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you and you will answer me. Have you comprehended the vast expanse of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. What is the way to the abode of light, and where does darkness reside? Can you take them to their places? Do you know the paths to their dwelling? Surely you know, for you were already born. You have lived so many years. Do they report to you, here we are, who endowed the heart with wisdom, or give understanding to the mind? Who has the wisdom to count the clouds? Who can tip over the water jars of the heavens? When the dust becomes hard and the clouds of earth stick together." The lesson today is God cares for creation. And have you ever thought in your life, where is God when bad things happen to you, to your family? Where is God in Afghanistan when Christians and little girls are being married to these older men and boys are everybody, a lot of people is being killed, and those who serve with our soldiers are being killed? Where is God in Haiti, who just suffered an earthquake, then followed by a hurricane? Where is God with all these fires in the western part of America that are destroying homes, people, and wildlife? And where is God when Christians are being killed and slaughtered all over the world? Where is God when diseases, epidemics, pandemics, and natural disasters are killing the world? What about our government and all those who are trying to destroy our country? Where is God? Where is God when the criminals are set loose, our justice system, there's burning down of towns and cities? What is going on in the world, and where is God? How can the justice of the Almighty God be defeated in the face of evil, especially human suffering, and even more particularly, the suffering of the innocent? The lesson today, we take a look at Job, who was blameless, he was upright, he was God-fearing man, whose whole life was turned completely upside down in a day. Can you imagine losing all your kids, your wealth, your servants, and your health all in a day's time? He suffered affliction from his well-intended friends who came to comfort him, but then when Job went turning around to their talking and beliefs, they said that he had some sin in his life, that's what was happening, that he wasn't as upright as he thought. His wife told him to curse God and die, and worst of all, he cried out to God and no answer came. Where was God? Then God allowed Satan to have his own way with Job, because he was righteous and blessed, but not to take his life. Job was left to agonize his life. He cursed the day he was born, and he cried out to God for his innocence and for being treated unfairly. This was from a man whose outcry was from a distraught spirit and in constant pain. But can you imagine being in Job's place, or, just everything, your whole life turned upside down? Through it all, it said Job stayed righteous. And God finally answered him. And Job turned directly to God for a legal decision. He wanted God to prove his innocence, and that he was innocent of all the charges that his friends leveled against him. And the bottom line was, Job suffered like he did remained a mystery to him. Job never did find an answer why he suffered the way he did. God did give him an answer. And the lesson today is God finally speaks, but not quite the way Job wanted to hear. And I was reading this and I thought, oh my word. He tells Job to brace himself like a man. In other words, he tells him to man up. And all this stuff was going on with Job, And God tells them this, and they think, what is going on? He told them that he never did give them an answer. He said, I will question, God tells him, he said, I will question you, and you will answer me. God stated that Job's complaining and raging against him was unjustified. And he told him that, you know, your complaining and anger against me is with limited understanding. You don't understand. God says nothing about Job's suffering or he don't address Job's problem about divine justice. Job gets neither a bill of indictment or a verdict of innocence, because God didn't do it. God does not humiliate or condemn Job. Job never gets a direct answer to his questions. And I was reading this and I'm thinking, wow, Job, he just needed a hug from God. But God gives an answer of, you know, who are you talking to? And that's the answer he got. We don't have enough vantage points to accuse God of incompetence, and Job didn't either. We look at our lives in a small area. Here's our lives, and this is what we see. If you was a bird and you was looking down, you see a little bit wider. If you was in an airplane, you see a little bit wider. If you was in a rocket, you see a little bit more. But if you was God, you see it all. And the Bible says that we see in part, but you know what? God sees all.
Right.
And we don't know what is really happening in the spiritual world or in the way God answers prayers sometimes. Do you think that we have the brain or sensory ability to take information in and make an evaluation of God's choices? Because we just see so little. We are not God, we are humans. Can you imagine that God would let us take the universe for just a day and what kind of mess we would create in that day? If it was me, there'd be a lot of people that's zapped, and there probably wouldn't be an earth at the end of the day because I see it in a human form. We have to just accept God for what he does and knows and have the faith to believe that he is in control. God asked Job some questions, and I was reading this and I'm thinking, I wonder how God asked him. Did he ask him with a little bit of sarcasm, or did he ask him in just a real easy going? But he says, where were you when I laid the foundation? Or did he say, where were you when I laid the foundation? How did he talk to God? You ever wonder about that? He says, can you oversee my creation? Can you explain my creation? And what if God would let us see a lot with our spiritual lives? Could we even take what God sees with the suffering, the pain? Could we see hell the way it is? Even the good and the bad, could we really see what God's doing and even live to see it? Could we not take it in our human minds and our hearts, nor could God be perceived by our ordinary senses? We don't, God is, we just can't conceive what the reasons why God does it, because he knows we don't. God is in everything, and part of God is in us if Jesus lives in us. But we got to realize that we are a part of creation, but we are not God. And if the universe and the world was gone today, God would still be here. We wouldn't, but God would still be here. The more we know about our universe and about God, the nature of man, the more we realize how much we don't know. Man is increasing knowledge every day, especially more in the last 60 years. And I got to thinking about this. There's more knowledge in the last 100 years than all the knowledge that's increased since the beginning of time. We're just learning more in the last 100 years. Do you know that The internet was only launched in 1969. It's only been here 52 years. And Siri was only launched in 2010, so it's only 11 years old. There is hardly anything that isn't available that you can ask the internet that it can't tell us. But you know what? I was thinking about this. I'm thinking, you know, we got so much knowledge. Why don't the internet, why can't they tell us? So I asked the internet, I said, why can't you teach us? And so I'm talking to the internet. I'm getting bored in this time in life. And I learned that it couldn't teach us how to become human or add value for the uplifting of humanity. It can't teach us emotions physically, it can't teach us spiritually, and it can't teach us about friendship or real world experience. So us humans are, we still important when it comes to emotions and that. I think sometimes, man, if he gets enough knowledge, he will become more like gods. And then he would not need them as a savior. And if it becomes their own gods, they can do as they please. And it's getting pretty close to that now where mankind thinks they're gods. But the thing is, we have become smarter, but we have not become wiser. And we learned that mankind could split the atom, but during this time, they was able to build an atomic bomb that killed thousands of people. In 1969, we set foot on the moon, and I got to thinking about this. You know what? That was 52 years ago, and there's not much. I mean, there's progress that's been made from stepping a foot on the moon, but if you think about it, there's not much progress from that. And they want to do a manned expedition, but they can't, and put a space station up on the moon, but they can't do it because it takes too much money and the amount of gear required, they can't haul it up to the moon. We got a space station that circles the Earth, but it's, I mean, compared to the universe, it's not that high up. So, just like Mars, we able to get a rover telescope, and I was thinking about this morning, I'm thinking, this is about, what, the fourth one that fifth one, whatever, they sit up there, and they can get it up there, but they leave all this trash up on Mars, so they really polluting Mars and not even been there. And but this about Mars, we can get this telescope to Mars, and we are learning more. But you know that Mars has been observed since the 1500s, and they had a telescope that could see Mars. But the telescopes are getting stronger and more powerful, and we able to see more up there. We able to see canals. We able to see that man cannot inhabit the planet, and we have learned that there's no Martians on it. So we learning a lot. It's cost probably billions and billions of dollars, but we learned that there is no Martians up there. The rover was able to explore more, and we know that Mars has 2 moons. We know the gravity force is 39% weaker on Mars than Earth, and it's a frozen planet where primary composed of carbon dioxide, which we can't live in, nitrogen, and argon. And it contains very traces of levels of waters, vapor, and oxygen. There's been slow progress made just learning about Mars since the 1500s. My conclusion about man's knowledge is the more man knows, the less he knows. How much we have learned, there's so many theories, but theories change with more knowledge. And I got to thinking about that. Their theories is more like our fact checkers on Facebook. This could be part truth, part false, or it could be part truth. So theories are fact checkers in my world. Now, let's talk about God who does know.
Right.
God has facts that has and will always be true. God has been here forever, and he is in all things. God controls the heaven, the seen, and the invisible. And I was thinking about how wonderful that God is, and people's crazy to think it's from a Big Bang theory because there's too much organized beauty, and everything works together as a unit. And God controls the heavens, he controls the stars, which brings forward the spring, he controls the constellations that helps bring forth the fall, and he helps us with this. Everything that's going on up there helps us down here with the agriculture, which feeds humans, which feeds the animals. Our trees gives us oxygen, and we give the trees carbon dioxide. They, the animals feed on God's creation, and it's just like a cycle of life that God does this. He helps the up into space. He feeds us. We feed the animals. We do this, but it's a cycle of life that God's in control of it. Where the cloud, God controls the clouds that brings forth rain for growth, for plants and trees to grow, to feed us, to shade us, and take care of each other. Isn't it great that God has it in control instead of man? He knows when lightning is dispersed. He knows where lightning is coming from the sky down or from the ground up. And it heats the air to 50,000 Fahrenheit. That's how strong lightning is. And we can't channel this heat or this power because God is so strong that 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hotter than the sun. Where does the wind come from and where does it go?
Yeah.
Who gives food to the raven? How does wild donkeys live in the mountain and survive in the desert? Do you know that a woodpecker has sponge-like pad in its head so he won't beat himself to death when he pecks on wood? It's just amazing fact. Just like we went to little tidbits. The Grand Canyon, when we went there, we seen, what was it, a ram on the rocks. Well, I mean, you know, the Grand Canyon is miles down, and you look and you see this ram on the rock, and you're thinking, how did it get there? How is it staying? And how is it surviving? But it survives only through God. It is believed that there are 20 billion solar systems, and researchers have seen they can observe the universe, and they can tangibly see about 150 billion galaxies. You know, this is man-made facts, but how far, they don't know. I mean, it's just theories that there's 20 billion. I mean, it might be more and more than that. Researchers has included the black hole in the Milky Way is so powerful, everything including light gets sucked into it, and if man was to go into it, he would never come back because of the force of gravity. Man's conclusion about the black hole, it remains a mystery. How, they don't know how it's formed. What they do know that there may be 100 million black holes in the Milky Way alone. God knows, they don't. We have tried to send, this is weird, we have tried to send messages out in space because we want to know if life is out there. We have sent them little info about what a human is, our solar system, and a strain of DNA. And its destination will be about 25,000 years to get there. But they hoping that it will be picked up by something before then. And do you think that God looks at humans and I'm here. You think that God looks at you, that we looking at all this stuff, and here's God right here, that we can find out all this stuff. The human body is one of the most complicated and fascinating living forms on earth. Do you know we breathe in about 11,000 liters of air every day? Your nose and ears will continue to grow your entire life. Humans has 5 million scent receptors. A hound dog has 300 million. Our brain weighs about 3 pounds. Your heart beats around 100,000 times a day. In 1 year alone, a human heart would pump enough blood to fill an Olympic-sized pool. If your blood vessels in the human body was laid end to end, it will encircle the world 4 times. And everybody knows that we have unique fingerprints, but do you know that we have a unique tongue print, each of us? God's little facts. How can we ever consider that there's not a God? What about our animal kingdom facts? A snail, how they find these facts, I have no idea, but I'm just reading them. A snail can sleep for 3 years at a time. Animals can sense when a person is having a seizure, or maybe a person that has cancer. They can sense that. And in it, they can sense coming disaster. They do things that, like a couple of days before, that it's not out of their habits to tell us about an impending disaster that's coming. And they said that if animals are running one way and you don't see nothing or you don't smell nothing, you better go with the animals, because they are sensing some kind of disaster's coming. Like they can smell smoke a lot farther, and we might not see nothing. And if animals are running a certain way, you better go with them, because something is getting to happen. Ostrich are a flightless and the largest bird, but cannot fly. But it can run about 30 miles at a time for up to 10 miles at a stretch. Its eye is bigger than its brain. And they say they're really dumb animals. They have no teeth, so they swallow pebbles to grind their food, and they can carry up to more than 2 pounds of pebbles in their stomach at one time. In conclusion, Job thought God had fallen asleep running the universe, and his life, because of divine neglect, he had to endure unjust suffering. Job didn't know as much as he thought in the end, and that was his conclusion. And he realized that he was insignificant, and that if God can rule the universe, he has it in control of our life. He has it in control of our nation. He has it in control. There was a 6-year-old that seen his parents throw a chair through a window, and he saw it as a spanking coming or time out, but the parents saw it as smoke filling the house, and it was a way out. So what we think God is not doing, sometimes God has it under control. We see circumstances now in our world which is unjust and tragic, and we're seeing it more and more every day. And we see as God not answering prayers. But God sees it in a wider angle, and we may never know the answers here or the reasons why God does what he does. But he's not going to let us down, for he has a purpose for everything, and he has promised us not to leave or forsake his own. It's so easy to question God's divine way, but we only see it in our human eyes, and it makes a difference when God knows the reasons. Our life as humans are so small, and you look at Job's life. He tried to live an upright life, and if you read in chapter, I think 31, it said that he was determined to live a pure life, and that he even made a covenant with his eyes. not to yield to lustful desires towards the opposite sex. He was aware of God's presence. He fought to defend his integrity before and after his life was turned upside down. Job began to raise questions about the ways of God. And I mean, who wouldn't if all this stuff was going on in our life? I mean, sometimes we do ask God questions, but sometimes he don't give us the answer. He realized he wasn't smart enough to argue with God. And I think that's probably the bottom line of our lives, that we don't understand God and we can question God, but we ain't smart enough to argue with God. Job was presumptuous as to imagine that his thoughts were superior to the wisdom and direction of God about his life. And, you know, that's another thing. If we think we're so superior and we know more than God, we got another thing coming. Job had a change in his attitudes towards God when he realized who God really is and how powerful and all-knowing he is. Man does not have the answers, and he never will. He might know, he's ever learning and never coming to the truth. His plans and God's plans and reasons are deeper, higher, and broader than what we can comprehend. You know, I've really been going through discouragement this year, and it's, you know, it's just a battle that we all, and probably it was all true and everything, that we all go through discouragement, because it just what's going on in America and what is going to happen if God don't bring back our country. We see changes, things changes every day, and we keep hearing that things is not going to get better. But you don't really know what to do about it. And me personally, I've been praying that God bring this darkness out to the light, just to show us what is going on. And if all these people are trying to destroy humanity, I pray, my prayer is, and it might be a selfish prayer, but I pray that they'll die before they ever see it come to pass. And that's just, and I pray that evil won't win, and I know it won't, but I realized that when I was studying this lesson, that God has a bigger plan than what I have. And like I said, I'd be zapping some people if God gave me the control, which I'm glad he don't. And I'm just glad I'm not God, because I just see a small piece of the picture, and what I'm seeing is not pretty. The conclusion is we are going to believe God will take care of us, and we got more than what. Are you going to believe God with do you believe in God? Do you believe God's going to take care of it? Or do you believe man who has theories and half-truths and all this? Are you going, and they wise and they know all this and they can take care of us? Who are you going to believe? I mean, I'm going to believe God. I believe that God has a perfect purpose for my life. I believe that God has a purpose for this country, and he has a purpose for the world.
Yes.
He does not want your answer because he already knows all of it. There's nothing that we can answer to God that, you know, God, you need to do this or you need to do that. There's no answer that we can give God that he don't already know that he has it in control. And the older my conclusion about this lesson is, the older I get in life, the more I don't know, the more questions I have.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can do is just depend on God about it. In the end, Job changed his way of thinking about God, and God gave him the victory. Because Job went through a dark side, but God blessed him double in the end. And the bottom line, can you imagine how, Job was upright and everything in his life before all this happened, but can you imagine what Job, how he seen life at a different light and never took it for granted again? Okay, Anybody wanna say anything?
You know, the one thing that I think is so marvelous about Job, that gives us a real lesson, and most people read over it and don't think about it. But all his friends, except the one, you know, accused him, said, surely you got sin in your life, God would do this to you.
Yeah.
And can you imagine the grief? You know, we've had people that have said goodbye to their loved ones here, and that's a single loved one. He lost all of his children, all his servants, except just a few, everything. He lost everything.
Yeah.
And can you imagine the grief he was going through when his friends that he trusted in sit there and constantly accused him of doing wrong? But the amazing thing about it is, Job's situation did not change till he prayed for his friends and forgave them. And when he prayed for his friends and forgave them for all their cruelty to him, then God healed him and gave him double.
Yeah.
So that was a blessing. So we are living in a day where everybody is doing what they want to do, irregardless of God. They're going their own way, doing their own thing. Now I read Billy Graham's daughter, and they were asking her, if God is so loving and so kind, why all these earthquakes and storms and all the wars and all this kind of stuff? And she had a marvelous answer. She said, and all the stuff that's going on, like schools and shootings, and she said, well, she said, look at it this way. We told God to get out of the school and not to let prayer in school. We told God to get out of our government
Yeah.
and not be in our government. We told God to get out of our businesses. We told God to get out of all these things, and God is a gentleman. Do you think if we would turn around and ask him back into the businesses, into the schools, that God wouldn't do it?
Oh, yeah.
He's let them take over, and he's given them what they asked for, and now we're suffering